Cheree and
Mayra
today and Hope to Hustle.
Yes.
Or in English, as we pronounce, Cheree and
Mayra.
Yes, Mayra Dias Gomes.
Yes.
Nice to have you here.
So nice to be here finally.
I'd love to talk a little bit about your story. I mean, to me, it's just, a lot that you've gone through. Mm-hmm. But it's so inspiring. Because I feel, and it's hard. It's one of those things where it's sad that we have to go through such struggles to have such bright light at the end of it too. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And like the struggles almost define us.
Absolutely.
And what I've realized, growing older in age, is that everybody has different struggles that hit them at different times of their life. And I feel some of us, who've gone through some stuff younger, tend to fall sometimes into addiction, or we just don't know how to cope because we're so young and our minds are still developing.
And we find different ways of escaping.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We don't know how to deal with it when we're young.
Mm-mm. And I wonder too, like if kids are taught how to cope and deal with life stresses at a younger age, would that prevent addiction? Them coping, or even if they know, are they still going to go down that path? I mean, did you know anything about drugs or alcohol addiction, any of those things at a young age?
Well, I did, but I was attracted to that kind of stuff. So I did because I found it very glamorous.
Right. Like
I talk about this all the time. I grew up idolizing rock stars and people whose lifestyles were pretty much drugs, sex, rock and roll. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I did know about drugs and addiction, but that is what I wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be different from the other kids in my school who were the opposite of that and who I didn't relate to and who I felt like I didn't belong with. So to me, being a drug addict was what it was to be cool.
Mm-hmm. And how old were you, would you say, when
I started using drugs? About 14 years old. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much the age, I think, when I started drinking and tried marijuana for the first time, and then eventually tried all sorts of drugs. Mm-hmm. I wanted to try every kind of drug. I talk about this all the time also, where I bought a book when I was about 14 years old about drugs, and I started checking out all the drugs that I had done. And I just pretty much wanted to have every possible experience. Mm-hmm.
No fear in that at all?
No fear at all. Isn't that crazy how our minds are when we're that young? Yeah. Nothing bad's going to happen to me.
Right.
You're invincible.
Yes.
And of course, I was, like you said, dealing with depression and, coping with the death of my father and other issues that I was having as well. A lot of insecurity when I was young. And drugs pretty much gave me confidence and made me feel like I was cool.
Mm-hmm. If you don't mind me asking, how old were you when your father passed away?
I was 11.
You were 11?
Yeah. I was very young.
Yeah. What happened?
So he passed away in a car accident. But the way that I found out that he had passed away was through an internet article. So I had woken up to go to school that day. I was a really good student at that time. I grew up a very, very good student. I loved reading and writing, and I was really focused in school when my dad was still alive. And my parents had left town to go to a play and a dinner. And I woke up and I was late to go to a math test at school. And my aunt, who lived with me and my younger sister at the time, brought us into the kitchen, and she said she had some bad news that she needed to tell us. And she said our parents had been in a car accident. But she had gotten these instructions from the television network that my dad was a writer for to break these news slowly. For some reason, they gave her that advice, which was really poor advice, and pretty much changed the course of my entire life because I pretty much was lied to. And as soon as she said that, I logged into the internet. I mean, we had internet maybe for 2 or 3 years at that point. But I had a computer in my house because my dad was a writer and I knew how to log into the internet. And so the homepage to the computer was a news page, and it was headline news that my dad had died in a taxi accident. And I read the news and saw photos of the accident. And at that age, it just made me very, very angry.
Right.
It made me very rebellious and very angry. I felt like I had been lied to and I had been betrayed. And mostly I felt like I was betrayed by God. Brazil is a very Catholic country. So, you know, people are very Catholic in Brazil, and you know, you're always thinking about God. So I felt if God exists, then why would he do that to me? Why would he take my dad away in this manner? And funny enough, my mom was a Catholic, but my dad was an atheist.
Oh, interesting.
So I was like, no, God doesn't exist, because if he did, he would have never done this.
Right, right. And you said you have a sister?
Yeah.
How old? Or is she younger or older?
She's younger than me. She was 3 years younger.
Oh my gosh. And what do you feel the reasoning behind the way that she told you was? Like, what were they trying to
She didn't know better. I don't blame her at all.
I mean, at some point they were going to tell you, or they were just hoping someone else was going?
I am not sure. And nowadays I think I should have that conversation with her again. And I also think that maybe she didn't want to have the responsibility to break those news. Right. My mom was in the hospital in the city that they were in. And I think maybe she was hoping that my mom would be able to tell us. But my mom had also been in the accident. And when she woke up, she didn't know that her husband had died as well. So she woke up saying, like, where is he? Where is he? Where is he?
That's just traumatic for, you know, young children and for her. You know, did everything drastically change after that? Absolutely.
So my dad was a very famous writer in Brazil. He pretty much wrote all of the most famous soap operas on television. And he was very, very loved and very respected by the entire country. I mean, he had been writing soap operas for television for many years, and plays and movies as well. He was the first Brazilian writer to be nominated for an Oscar.
Wow.
He was the only one to win the Golden Palm in Cannes. So he was very, very loved and very respected. People loved his work. So this was major news. Right. Everybody was talking about this, you know, and everybody was mourning this very, very deeply. People thought like the quality of television has just completely changed from today on, because my dad was such a great critical social writer. And he knew better than anyone how to portray like the problems of Brazilian people on television through characters. So everybody was mourning this.
Right.
And I remember we couldn't even turn on the television. So I think my mom kind of tried to guard us from everything that was going on. And I remember that initially we went to France for a month just to get away from Brazil and all the news and everything. But my mom was also really young, and she was dealing with her loss as well.
Right.
And I don't think she knew exactly how to go about it either, because she was dealing with her own trauma.
When you lose somebody so close to you, I mean, you probably loved him more than anybody, you know, as his daughter. And having so many, like, not being able to turn on the TV and knowing that that's going to be on, like, how did that make you feel as a young kid? Like, did you feel like, wow, he was so loved and everybody's talking about it? Did it make you angry at all?
It made me really, really angry.
Yeah.
I think the main feeling that I had was anger. But also I remember, for example, the first time that I returned to school and all the kids in my class, they kind of wanted to show solidarity towards me, but they kind of just formed a circle around me and sat around me in silence. And I hated it, because I just wanted things to be normal.
We have an awesome guest today, Dorrough Music.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. How you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for coming out here.
Appreciate you having me. This is my first time in Hollister, you know.
Yeah.
I checked into the podcast, you know, a little bit, and, you know, it looked dope. So I'm glad to be here.
There's so many other rappers and musicians out there. And do you find yourself trying to gear your music more towards an audience versus what it is that you're feeling, where before when you were younger, it was kind of thoughts and feelings onto paper? Or are you still just putting your thoughts and feels onto paper and it's still making the music authentically you, and that's what's making it successful? Or do you have to kind of do a combination of both?
Well, all right. So to answer that question, for the average person and artist, is definitely the social media and everything definitely make it harder for them to be as authentic that they may want to be or would be. For me, it's no. It's like, because I've always been the person where I've always kind of went against the grain to stay myself in a certain kind of way. I do know how to play ball. That's what we call it when the temperature is a certain kind of way in the music industry, or it's a sound out, or it's something going on, or it's a trend. And like sometimes you play within that trend, but be yourself within that. You get what I'm saying? We call that playing ball. But then there's sometimes where I completely rebel against that and just do. I dropped a project earlier this summer, and it's completely against what would be considered the trend of right now, but it's 100% authentic to who I am. So it still works. Get what I'm saying? And it's like, I do a combination of both, or the combination of a lot of different things. But if you just talk about it in general, yeah, social media make it harder for artists and people that's coming out and making music and being out there, because most people gonna always sway to whatever is popping and what the sound is. And the more the trick about that is the more you got artists right now that come out and they can sound really good of what's hot, but you're gonna lose in the end because you really only win from your originality. You'll never not see that be the case, even if it seemed that way. Like, even if you temporarily, if I came out an artist and I was able to make a song that sounds like right now, but it's not my authentic sound, but then I was able to get with a team of people who knew how to use the internet really well, and they could make this trending, and they can make it popping, and it'll actually happen, right? Temporarily, the downside will be you're a win in that world, and then you can never extract from it again. So if it was a new trend coming on and I was gonna do it, and I really wanted to just say that's just what it is. I gotta find my way. I gotta find a way to be myself within that, and that's the balance right there. And you shouldn't always do that either. It should be times where you just lock into your own world, and sometimes that you create the trend that way. You get what I'm saying, or something. You know, so I just feel like, and that's with everything in life, no matter what you do, it ain't just music. You know, I feel like that's the way you got to go when it comes to everything. You know, sometimes, and the more actually you are yourself, the more you can indulge in the trend, because people gonna know. Like, when you so authentic, like, that's just what it's gonna be, and then you can indulge in trends every now and then. I'm not saying that people who go for the trends, like, it ain't. It's a reason why they that way. You get what I'm saying? So I don't never want to tell people not to play ball and not to, you know, embrace change, or if you ever want to switch up something you're doing or add something to your character or whatever you're doing, you can do that. But you should definitely want to be yourself first and find out who you are first. And sometimes it takes, you know, you exploring it, you know, just doing different things that may not be in the norm at the time. Right.
And I agree with that, because change is hard, you know, and it's scary, but sometimes it's necessary too. That, okay, it's like been doing the same thing. Like, I got to shift a little bit and change a little bit. And sometimes that can be a scary move while still being yourself. With all the pressure nowadays, do you feel like you get a lot more feedback? Like, I feel like when music used to just come out on the radio or MySpace, and when you just pick the simple song, you just change on your whole profile and you have this whole look. Oh my goodness. I still miss MySpace over Instagram and Facebook. You know, I wish we still had the simplicity of that.
It's definitely gold in simplicity. I think that, like, when it comes to music, especially now, simplicity always gonna win. And what people don't know about that, and especially when it comes to music, like, that's actually harder than making something complex. I can make the most complex song easier than making a simple song, and people don't understand that. It seems like when you hear a song that's so simple that you love, it's actually harder to make those than it is anything else. So, you know, that's the thing about simplicity. Like, it's not as easy as it sounds sometimes in creating it. But the more you into your passion and the more you naturally just flowing within what you're doing, that's when it happens. You know, it's something that you can't force or just necessarily try to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like when it used to, songs were just on the radio, it was just on the radio. And if you didn't like a song or you were critiquing something, it would just be amongst maybe your close friends or one other person, where now if somebody has an input, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
How does that affect you at all?
I mean, that ain't never affected me because I ain't never really cared what people thought like that, you know.
That's
but
good.
it definitely affects people.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
You know, I always think about the new artists. They definitely affected by that because what I can easily tell the difference between, you know, artists now and then and like what I see is, you know, adversity is really hard for them artists, you know, new artists. You know, I see it all the time where I see artists, you know, they speak out on ready to give up because they might have got some type of criticism or they basically fall out with it a different that. And like when we was coming, that wasn't a such thing. Like
right.
You had to do everything in everybody's face and you had to take it right. It's one thing. Criticism is easy to me if you get it on the internet, but if you get it in real life, that's even harder. And we had to do everything so where if people if they didn't like what you was doing, you was gonna know right then and there in front of people, and that built a certain type of skin. So it's like with me, when I see stuff like that, like it's more funny than anything. Like that ain't never bothered me as an artist, but I can see how it can bother other people.
Yeah,
you know?
and that's interesting that you say that because it's true. So like the criticism, you know, I feel like people are just so quick to be behind a keyboard now. You know, they're just
people
gonna
tough guys. They tough behind the keyboard.
Where if you were getting some sort of criticism in front, it probably was something that you want to take in a little bit more. Not so much negative. It was like, hey, you could have done this different or whatnot. More like advice. The way that people are coming at people now on the internet, people was never doing that because nobody ain't that bold. You know, now you did. People will voice if they didn't like your music or like what you was doing, but not in a way to where how they do it on the internet to people saying the boldest stuff in the boldest way. They'll never do that in real life. Sometimes you actually see these people who say that in real life and they don't have the same type of energy. So it's a whole different world when it comes to it. But it's funny. I think that part is one of the funnier parts of everything. Like, what advice would you give to somebody that's really passionate and really has a goal to become a newer rapper, but they're having all of that pressure now and they have all that influence and they have so much more criticism than people, you know, when you started? What advice do you have for them to continue their goals and dreams with it?
I would say they should make the music and use the music to maneuver first and create whether it's a small team or big team around them that's gonna block all that out. Like if you're an artist and you really sensitive to criticism and stuff like that, then you should be one of the ones that stay off the internet in a certain kind of way. Obviously, it's no way to stay off the internet, but it is a way to stay off the internet in a certain kind of way. So I would tell those artists to really build something around them if they need to, whether it's team, family, that helps block all that out if they can't do that themselves. You know, that's one thing. The other thing I would say is to get over that. You know what I'm saying? Go through that and get past that. That ain't something you want to grow and live with and not, you know, get strong at. That should be something where if you had a problem with that years down the line, that shouldn't be a weakness no more. I wouldn't say live with that. Just go through it. Criticism is internet criticism. You can use it for good. It could be good or bad, but it shouldn't be nothing that stop you from your talent, especially if you good and you passionate and you really making good music. I know it's artists out there that will never see the light of day because they done gave up because of something like that. And you just can't let that happen. Right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, pursue your goals and dreams.
I would say don't let that happen. That's my number one answer. Don't let it happen. Just ignore
it. Don't care what anyone says. Don't give a shit what they say.
And do what you got to do to build that core. Like if you don't got that naturally, then do what you got to do to build it.
I have the amazing Justin Wenzel here. Justin, how are you?
I don't know about amazing, but I'm good.
I mean, dude, you're doing some pretty cool shit.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about your story and, you know, your background. I know that you are in recovery. You shared a little bit about, you know, doing cocaine and alcohol and working out all at the same time. So
right.
How did that all start? Like, were you really young? Like, if you look back?
When I look back to it, I've never ever told this story before, but when I was young, I went on a mission trip and,
like for church?
For church.
Okay.
Yes. In, Ixmiquilpan, Mexico. Okay. I don't think I've ever even thought about this until just now. And this is actually where I believe someone challenged me on my addiction. I was like 13 years old.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. we had to take a 15-passenger van through the mountains. And I can't even believe this even came up right now. They gave us Dramamine. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying to the guide that was in charge of us, all the kids, I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to need a second one. And he looked at me and he's like, you have a problem with drugs? I swear to God. And I haven't even thought about this in years and years and years, but just right now, for some reason, this just popped in my head. And I was like, what? No, I'm just a big kid. Like, and I'm like, well, that was when it really started, wasn't it?
For Dramamine.
Because it made you drowsy and feel loopy. And I was like, hell yeah, I want to feel like that. Uh-huh. 13 years old. Who would have thought? And I wasn't like, I didn't come from a family of like drug addicts. My family partied a little bit, like as far as just like drinking wine and stuff goes at first. Right.
Right.
But like good church going parents, like, had sent their kid out on a mission trip, but then it was like after that, started drinking.
Because of the Dramamine?
No. I'm just saying like later on in life.
Right.
No, it wasn't like I took Dramamine. I was on this like church retreat. Like just party in my face. No, that was just one moment I can remember, like when it was first somebody challenged me about something.
Right.
But of course I was 13. I'm like, oh, fuck you. I didn't like. But then things started happening later on in life when it was like, start drinking, and drinking to blackout. You're young, 14 years old. You don't know what your tolerance is and, sneaking alcohol from your parents and things like that. And then it was pills.
How old were you when you started taking pills?
Probably 16, 17.
Oh, wow. Do you remember who first introduced you to pills or gave you your first pill?
Yeah, it was Adderall was probably the first stint. And homies from high school, that did Adderall, and then they would like sniff it and stuff, which was terrible. Like just do coke,
right?
and then the same kid that got me into Adderall, shortly after got me into cocaine. And when I was young, like I was I did pretty well financially. Like 18 years old, I had like a condo in downtown in the city. Bad idea for an 18-year-old for sure.
Right.
But definitely got into coke. Had to terminate that lease to move home with my family because of cocaine.
Oh, wow.
Just for a short period of time, but I still drank and stuff. Like, again, you don't know. When you're not in this world, it's obvious now that it's like how we try to switch from substances or we like, oh, we'll still drink or we're just going to smoke weed or we're just going to do this and like whatever. That's what most people believe. Right. Is that they really can leave a substance and replace it with another substance, right? Like to us, we understand that's psychosis, but to any normal person that's actually an alcoholic, but it's not identified to them. Right. So it's like, okay, I had a problem with cocaine, moved back home and I'm still drinking wine, getting fucked up. With my family, inevitably I'm going to land back into cocaine. Right. And I did, and everything else. And so, but when you're not knowledgeable, when recovery is not a normal topic in a household, I think that could almost be a worse of a situation than people who just like, this is what we do. Right. And I think too, so this, you said how old were you when you moved back home? Like 18, 19. Right. So there's a big denial too there at that age, where it's telling ourselves, well, it just got out of hand, tone it back a little bit. Right. It's a phase. Right. Exactly. And I talk about this often as well, because I grew up with, a good family. There was no addiction. Stable parents, went to a private school, and it was the not knowing. I had no knowledge. Like now it's, there's podcasts and there's everyone talking about it. And now we're facing a huge epidemic and fentanyl's everywhere. But like for me, when I was younger, it really wasn't taught. There was a DARE program at school, which I don't even remember if it was mandatory to go or if it happened to, you know what I mean? Right. So it's like, it wasn't talked about and I didn't have any knowledge. Right. Well, yeah. And DARE was more of like scaring you about the drugs.
Right, exactly. Not educating.
It wasn't educating.
Exactly.
And it wasn't educating on actual substance abuse. It was just educating on use.
I had no idea when I took pills that it would quickly, one, not only just downhill spiral to heroin, but that there's even withdrawal symptoms associated with it.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Even using heroin, I had no idea what withdrawal symptoms were until I first got sick. And I'm like, I think I'm just sick. And then it's like, no, you're experiencing withdrawal symptoms.
Right. Yeah, no, I can't forget that. I never did heroin. I did have a long stint with Vicodin and Norcos, like years, where I was taking, like, I might as well have done heroin. I was doing taking 30, 40 Norco 10s. And this is something I've told a few people about. Oxycontin is what saved my life.
Interesting.
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
And I think I talked about this once on another podcast, but maybe not. Oxycontin is what saved my life because I was being prescribed. So again, you're told, like, it's in your head, you're like, oh, I'm prescribed it. Like, I can take it, and the doctor was over prescribing me. This is right at the beginning of the opioid epidemic, right?
And this was Oxy that you were getting prescribed?
It was Norco. But I was getting like 300 a month.
Wow.
Pill bottles like this tall.
What happened that you were getting prescribed?
I faked an injury. I had a knee injury, and then I just prolonged it because I liked the way the Oxys made me, or the Norcos made me feel.
Right.
So my doctor was like a family doctor, wealthy community. Had all the moms on Xanax and running around drinking wine and stuff. Like that was like the area that was what it was. So he was, I could just fake it. Oh man, my back hurts, my knee hurts, and he would just write me for whatever. He didn't care. Hate that doctor's guts still to this day now.
Totally.
He totally enabled me. But it was myself too, but he just did. Well, eventually when he would ask me, because I'd constantly hit him up for refills, private doctor, so he got paid concierge medicine. So you paid him like a subscription every month. And so he'd just write me whatever. I'd be away at college and, I got a sore throat, promethazine with codeine.
Right.
And then next thing you know, all my homies are in class in college drinking purple Sprite, and that, so it got really out of hand with the Norcos. I would always have like a pocket full of them. Right. And, finally my doctor was like, listen, you're going to blow your stomach out. He's like, we're going to switch you. We're going to switch you to Oxycontin. And that was about the same time Heath Ledger had passed from Oxycontin. And I also was taking Klonopin too. So that was drinking with those two was supposed to be the cocktail that will take you out. Right. My tolerance level was probably so high from the alcohol, the Klonopin and the Vicodin that the Oxycontin wouldn't probably have made a difference.
Right.
But in my head,
in your mind,
it was Oxycontin.
Thank God.
Right.
That you knew can't touch that one.
Right. So I took it exactly as prescribed. Exactly as prescribed. And it stopped serving its purpose. So I just stopped taking it.
And you didn't have withdrawal symptoms?
Oh, yeah.
You did?
Oh, yeah. The diarrhea, the sweats, all that for probably a month.
Robert, Ri'chard, thank you so much for coming out here. I appreciate it. And I am excited that you are episode 3 on Hope to Hustle. I mean, I'm just impressed and very proud of you with all your accomplishments and everything that you do and the discipline that you have for yourself. And, I just kind of want to get into that a little bit. The whole purpose of this podcast is to share inspiration and hope for those that are listening who are coming from all sorts of walks of life.
Absolutely. Yeah. One, I want to give you your flowers because I am very, very impressed. And I'm glad that we've drawn closer together and talking about the things that are influencing us, how we're servicing the world and helping other people. I think the first thing I'm just going to get into is just God first. There's a lot of people out there listening. And, when you're trying to figure out how to navigate, whether it be your life or earth or ever how you see it, I really think that leaning on God first is really important. The first 4 letters in the Bible is in the beginning, God. And I make sure that I think of that in everything that I do. The days, the things I'm trying to accomplish, my connection with my family and friends, and even people that, maybe you have a disadvantage or a conflict with, in the beginning, God. And then the second thing I think is that, people need work. When you're trying to design, what your aspirations are, I think people should be leaning into what are you wildly passionate about? What is something that gets you up in the morning enthusiastically? And then how do you build to make that a living for yourself?
Right.
And to find that passion in that work. And I've found personally that it's connecting with other people. I love people.
Me too.
Yeah, they're great. They're great. They're great. And we all need each other. So
yeah, I need people. Like I'm such an extrovert that if I am not talking to people, then I'm just like kind of going a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
I'm definitely a people person, and I agree with you. I mean, God first, my biggest thing is let go and let God. And through my struggles from, recovery and going through that process to now owning multiple businesses, there's a lot of hard, trying times that I want to give up, or I'm becoming impatient. And it's let go and let God and pray and gratitude. That is huge for me because I believe in the saying of like, you have to love and believe and trust in God, not just when you need something, not to be going to Him because everything's failing or crumbling and now you're in desperation mode. But it's waking up with gratitude every day and being thankful that He is guiding us through this walk of life. And to me, that's huge.
Absolutely. So I'm learning. Did you struggle with substance and stuff in your past?
I did.
You did?
Yeah.
And like the catalyst for it, I mean, obviously, we're all kind of like kids at one point, and then you start evolving and becoming this independent person that becomes more of adult, and whether that's being rebellious or whatever. What was sort of like the beginning for you to sort of like slip into it?
Well, I would say that I've always been that down to do girl.
Got you.
Like, hey, let's go jump off a bridge in a lake.
A daredevil.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm down. I always thought it was like cool. It's like, I don't want to say necessarily fitting in, but it's like, yeah, push me to a limit. I adrenaline
You're
junkie
fearless
too.
and brave.
Totally.
Right.
But having that personality also came with, well, here's cocaine. All right, yeah, I'll try it. Here's a pill. Okay, I'll try it.
Right.
And I also feel like the lack of knowledge. And you met my grandparents, right? They're great.
They're amazing.
My mom's amazing. My family is amazing. I don't come from a household of addiction at all. I come from a very faith-based family. I mean, we grew up, I went to private school my entire life. And, not my entire school years, but I switched over into middle school, and that was really difficult for me. Got bullied a lot, and so really try to fit in where I could. I was a cheerleader, and so I didn't really experiment with drugs through high school. I would say it was more after. And I went through a really difficult breakup, and I was working as a cocktail server, lots of alcohol around and partying. And that's when I first tried opiates.
Got you.
And that's where it quickly downhill spiraled. Luckily, my addiction lasted, about 3 years. But it went from taking 5 milligram Norcos to injecting heroin 13 times a day.
Wow.
And back then...
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It was a scary place to be. There was a lot of shame and guilt that I had. I really, my family was not familiar with substance abuse or addiction, so it was easy for me to hide it from them at that time. And I was also smart and manipulative. So I was getting in trouble legally and hiding that from my family. And my younger brother was like, you guys... she's on drugs and nobody's seeing it. You have to do something about it. I mean, it got to a point where I was on probation, and those little travel bottles that you use, like shampoo?
Yeah, for sure. You get them at like Bed Bath & Beyond.
Exactly. Target, those little travel size.
Yeah, travel size.
I mean, I was so sick in my addiction, and I was doing everything that I could to keep that addiction going, that I was paying people $20 for their pee, putting it in that shampoo bottle, putting foil on top of it, and putting it, where I shouldn't be to keep it warm, to pass my test at probation with 3 mirrors around me and my probation officer standing right in front of me. And I'd poke it and they would be like, what is this chick on? What is she doing? And we can tell something's up, but she's passing her test. It's not fake urine. It's temperature correct, and it's negative.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Like James Bond.
crazy, right?
Right.
But I'm glad that back then drug charges were felonies, because I then got picked up. My mom is the one actually that called the police on me. And the last time I got arrested, I went to jail 5 days too long, but I went in a courtroom and I was facing 2 years in prison. I am not somebody that can go to prison, okay?
Right,
I
yeah.
cannot even handle 5 days in county jail.
It's fall fashion right now. I can't be doing that.
I can't do it. I'm
Can't
like
wear
crying.
orange every day.
You're trying to teach me how to warm up a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to make it taste better? What? Like,
Yeah.
this is not me. And so I had the opportunity to go to treatment, and I'm so thankful for that, because that accountability of having prison hanging over my head if I didn't, was very scary. So it kept me in treatment. I did 7 months in treatment. Quickly began working in the field, and here I am almost 12 years later. Been working in this field for little over 10 years.
Yeah.
I've had my facility for 9, and it's just been a journey. I mean, it's crazy. I never thought that I would be here because of something that I struggled with that was life and death, But I'm thankful, and I'm thankful that I'm able to share hope with other people, with families, with my clients, and meet other amazing people who have, a lot of alignment with my thought process and my goals and hopes for other individuals.
I applaud you for sure. They say whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You're like a testament to that. So that's really cool.
I appreciate that.
My family. So my grandfather struggled with like alcohol substance abuse, but my father's 90. So my grandfather, Norwood Ri'chard.
Wow.
He's a Frenchman and living in Louisiana in the 1930s.
Wow.
And so he struggled with alcoholism. So I think my dad was very much like, put that out there when I was young. Like, hey, I don't want you to be involved in like, drugs and alcohol and that kind of stuff. So, I just try and make sure that even in my own journey that there's not another God that is owning me.
Everybody, I'd like to welcome Shy. She's been a good friend of mine for many years, and she has a phenomenal story and is very inspirational with everything that she does in her personal life as well as her business, and I'm excited to share more. Your parents had gotten divorced.
Yeah.
How old were you?
I was 12 when they separated, and then they tried to work it out for about a year, and then I was almost 14 when they actually got divorced.
I'm sure that took a bit of a toll.
Yeah.
At that age.
Oh yeah,
Teenager.
I turned into a angry, like, I was wild. I punched walls like daily. I actually have tattoos covering all my knuckles just from how much I punched walls. And I did get in fights with girls or guys, but I just loved to hit a hard wall. It just had a nice little relief to it.
Yeah. And how did that last for a period of time? Do you feel it went hand in hand with like your age or?
So I got put into counseling because of my anger management. And that was about when I was 15, and I actually still see my same therapist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's rare.
Yeah, right?
I mean,
I know. It's been 17. I'm going to be 33, 17.
Wow. Especially
18 years.
with adolescence, and that carry on through adulthood. I mean, that's awesome that you've felt comfortable with your therapist. Do you feel that helped a lot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still use a lot of the tools she gave me then. One of them was that I'm just a real physical person. And so I had this release when I would punch the wall that we like translated into walking when I would get mad, and I only could communicate with people when I was walking. And she would have me channel like what I felt when I would punch a wall into my feet, releasing that energy and like emotion into the ground. And that helped me be able to have calm conversations with people and like work through conflict rather than flipping out and cussing someone out and punching a wall.
Yeah.
So it did help.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, that's crazy. I didn't even know that you had gone through that. And with therapy, were you able to get through the divorce? I mean, how were they through separation? Were they calm for your sake? Did they quickly move on, or they stay separated, for a while? You said they try to work it out and then they...
So it's a very interesting kind of situation. I'm very like an open book with stuff because I just feel like I never know who's going to need to hear certain things to draw like connection. But my mom she dated. She was off kind of doing her thing. My dad ended up in a relationship immediately with one of my Sunday school teachers. And that was a lot because I felt very on display for the whole church. And it was, it's a community. I don't want to say it's more gossipy than any other community. I think when you're just in that type of environment, people talk. And so that was part of my anger, was that my whole family was kind of on display in this negative light. And so my mom and me left that church, and my dad still goes there. And his kind of development through that was really difficult. He also struggles with anger. And I think I picked up a lot of his tendencies through just like learned behavior. And so in those years, and even when I was younger, I dealt with a lot of his rage. And I didn't realize until I was older and dealt with my own, the similarities we had in like blacking out and not really knowing what you're saying. And that was a huge impact because I thought everything he said, he fully meant. And so I took those scars and was like, if my own dad thinks these things of me, then every other man or person is going to think them. And it wasn't until I was in my first marriage. And
how old were you when you first got married?
I just turned 21.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were still a baby
I was a
yourself.
baby. I'm like mind blown now when I look at my stepson's 20, just turned 22. And I'm like, I would never imagine him to be married.
Right.
Living in another state. Like, it's just wild.
And how was that relationship? Do you feel it was healthy, or do you feel you were taking characteristics and traits and that kind of flowed into your relationship?
I think that relationship is a little bit of everything, a little bit toxic. It had a little bit of positive like growth. It was a very weird situation of how we came together. He didn't really propose. We didn't have this like long drawn out love. And I don't even know how I would describe it other than it felt very, I guess like my duty or what I owed God, just because that was kind of put on me. And I felt a little bit manipulated, but at that point I didn't know. I just felt bad about things I had done. And I had a lot of guilt and shame for situations I had put myself in my early like adult years. And so my way of, cleaning my slate was honoring this marriage. And I appreciate that marriage, and I appreciate him because my relationship with God and my faith grew so much. There was a lot of very toxic things that went on in that relationship, but if I was to say one positive, that he did make sure my relationship with God was like on point and came first. But
was he really religious too?
Yeah.
Okay. So it was toxic in a sense of like both of you guys, or more so things that you dealt with in the marriage?
I think it was, so when I was in the marriage, I definitely put all the blame on him. I think that's a natural thing when you're younger and you kind of learn as you get older what your parts are and everything. And so when I was definitely in it, I thought it was him. He was an addict. He did suffer back and forth with being sober and getting back onto stuff, and I had no idea how to really handle it, and I didn't have outside help. But in the same space, I wasn't mature enough emotionally to be the best support system for him. I definitely tried. And then when I got pushed to my breaking point, I would resort back to who I was in high school, and it would turn physical. My safety has always been, for some reason, violence. If I get pushed enough and triggered, that's where I went. And so he had his toxic contributions, and so did I.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to go through, especially if, you know, at that age and, you know, you're not struggling with addiction, but you are in a relationship with somebody that is struggling. You know, do you feel that it was, okay, you need help, I'm recognizing there's an issue here, or more so turning the eye away from it? You know, like, did you guys, you know what I mean? I mean, I feel like addiction, and I don't know what it is that he was struggling with, but, you know, it can go, especially in a young love situation, it can go two ways. It's, you know, you are struggling, you need help, our issues in our marriage is because of that, or I have my own issues as well, we have a lot of toxic traits, I'm going to kind of, you know, turn an eye and don't really pay attention to what's going on here.
Yeah, I think that I went through both phases. I think the first time I really realized like there's something definitely wrong, I reached out for help, and the people that I reached out to kind of just were like, oh yeah, it is what it is. That's just him. And it like broke my heart for him that no one was willing to step in or help. And a lot of the stuff that he had told me while he was sober about how he had to get sober on his own, I had to watch it again, and it was really heartbreaking to see. So I did try to help. I never firsthand saw anyone help him, ever. It was always him trying to figure it out on his own. We did have a good couple that supported us while we lived in another state, and that man had also been an addict, and he helped where he could as far as like emotional support and being a friend. But I think there's so much more that goes into it that you can't just put that on one person to be available all the time when you need them.
Is the addiction what kind of ended your guys' marriage, or more just growing apart?
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was. There was a lot of physical stuff that would happen when he was having issues. And I didn't always, because I didn't struggle with that, I wasn't good at seeing for sure, like, are you actually using something or not? And I went through all this stuff when he was moving out and we had separated, and I found a lot of evidence, but I had never gone through any of his stuff before to find it. But him sober and him using were two completely different people. And I realized that with other addicts in my life. And I think that's what's always made it so hard for me, is I have such a soft spot for their heart when they're sober, because you see them and they're some of the sweetest, most kind people I've ever met in my life. So when they make that switch and they're a completely different person, it's confusing for me to watch and to know how to help them and like when to help myself. And that was kind of how we ended.